Canelo Alvarez's story is not only about a boxer rising to greatness. It is about Mexico's resilience in the ring, its enduring pride, and the young man who turned himself into one of the most feared fighters of his generation. For decades, America has claimed boxing supremacy, producing legends who towered above the sport. Yet, there came a time when a fiery-haired teenager from Guadalajara emerged with fists sharp enough to carve his nation's name into the annals of history. Time and again, Canelo Alvarez proved that while America had strength, Mexico had brilliance. What set him apart was not only his skill but also his willpower, his refusal to break under pressure, and his ability to humiliate opponents who underestimated him. Through fights against brash Americans, hardened veterans, and arrogant challengers who thought they could dethrone him, Alvarez consistently demonstrated that boxing was more than a sport. It was an art form, and he was its master craftsman. One of the earliest tests in his career came when Canelo was still just 19 years old. Across the ring stood Leonardo Tiner, a rugged 34-year-old American who had built a reputation not only for winning fights but also for embodying a wild, street brawler energy that made him unpredictable. Known to fans as the Pain Server, Tiner entered the contest boasting a record of 21 wins with only 2 defeats, an impressive ledger for a man whose style seemed unpolished but effective. His grin was unsettling, his movements erratic, and his personality intimidating to many who met him. Canelo, however, was unmoved. Before the fight, Tiner mocked the young Mexican mercilessly, even joking about his name. He laughed at Alvarez's nickname, which means cinnamon, and sneered in interviews about what he would do to him in the ring. His arrogance fueled the fire inside Canelo. For a young fighter on the brink of international recognition, this was the perfect moment to prove his worth. From the opening bell, Tiner charged forward recklessly, throwing wild punches and trying to drag Alvarez into a street fight. The American had never been knocked down in his career and prided himself on being unbreakable, with a chin like granite and a body that could endure punishment. But the Mexican teenager was no ordinary opponent. Alvarez showed patience beyond his years, sitting in the pocket and countering with sharp, precise punches. Round by round, he adjusted to Tiner's unorthodox style, mastering his timing and range. By the third round, the fight turned into a display of Mexican fighting spirit. Canelo absorbed the heat, welcoming the chaos, and returned fire with blistering counters that left the veteran bewildered. Though Tiner fought valiantly and even landed big shots to test the young man's chin, Alvarez refused to back down. Instead, he thrived under the pressure, smiling faintly as though the violence only made him stronger. The later rounds painted a clearer picture of Alvarez's brilliance. While Tiner pressed forward like a bull unwilling to accept defeat, Canelo dissected him with accuracy. His body shots slowed the American down, his uppercuts snapped his head back, and his counters punished every mistake. By the championship rounds, it was clear that the tide had completely turned. Tiner, exhausted yet still determined, tried to keep coming forward, but his punches had lost their steam. Canelo, calm and collected, had mastered the dance, controlling the pace and delivering punishment with artistry. When the final bell rang, Tiner, ever brash, raised his arms as though victorious, but the truth was undeniable. The judges awarded Alvarez every single round. It was a unanimous decision, decisive and absolute, and proof that the young Mexican was ready to take on the world. Fast forward to May 4, 2019. By this point, Canelo Alvarez was no longer the hungry teenager fighting for recognition but the biggest star in boxing, carrying the pride of Mexico on his shoulders. He walked into Madison Square Garden, a venue synonymous with boxing greatness, to unify the middleweight titles against Daniel Jacobs, the proud American known as the Miracle Man. Jacobs' story was inspirational. He had survived cancer and returned to boxing with incredible courage, earning the IBF belt along the way. From Brownsville, Brooklyn, he embodied New York toughness and carried himself with confidence. In the build-up, Jacobs hurled insults at Alvarez, mocking his physique and trying to unsettle him with verbal jabs. He promised the world that he would silence Canelo's supporters and prove that America could still dominate. For Jacobs, this was the biggest opportunity of his life. For Canelo, It was another routine step in what had become a long ritual of humiliating American challengers. The atmosphere inside the garden was electric. From the opening round, Jacobs tried to impose his size advantage, moving fluidly and jabbing with intent. He managed to force Canelo onto the back foot at times, creating moments of tension that had the crowd roaring. Jacobs's punches were fast and carried real weight, but Alvarez showed composure. With tight defense and exceptional head movement, he avoided the worst of the damage and fired back with combinations that scored cleanly. It was a battle of wills, each man trying to assert dominance, trading shots in close quarters as the fans rose to their feet. Jacobs's strategy was clear: use his reach, lean on his size, and hope to overwhelm Canelo. But Alvarez, as always, had studied his opponent thoroughly. He picked his moments carefully, countering with precision, punishing the body, and showing that he was not rattled. As the fight progressed into the middle rounds, the difference in class became more apparent. Jacobs landed occasional big punches, but Canelo absorbed them and answered with sharper, more effective work. His body shots slowed Jacobs down, his uppercuts pierced through the guard, and his defensive movements left Jacobs swinging at shadows. By the championship rounds, Alvarez had taken control. Jacobs tried desperately to rally, throwing punches in bunches and pressing forward, but his attacks lacked the snap they had early on. Canelo remained in command, delivering crisp counters and controlling the tempo. After 12 hard-fought rounds, all three judges scored the fight in Alvarez's favor. Another unanimous decision, another American challenger humbled. That night, Alvarez unified the middleweight division, cementing his place as the sport's premier star and proving once again that Mexican boxing was untouchable. Yet perhaps one of the most memorable nights of Alvarez's career came in May 2015, when he faced James Kirkland. Kirkland's story was one of squandered potential and raw aggression. Hailing from Austin, Texas, he had served time in prison for armed robbery and later for firearms possession. His career was often interrupted by personal troubles, but when he fought like a man possessed. Known as the Mandingo Warrior, Kirkland was fearless, reckless, and relentless. For fans, this fight was intriguing not only because of Kirkland's reputation, but also because it was Canelo's chance to bounce back from the painful loss he had suffered 2 years earlier against Floyd Mayweather. Could Alvarez show he had grown since then, or would Kirkland's ferocity overwhelm him? The answer came quickly. From the opening bell, Kirkland charged like a storm, throwing wild, heavy punches that pushed Alvarez against the ropes. For a moment, it looked as though Kirkland's intensity might break through. He landed big shots, forcing Canelo to cover up. But beneath the surface, Alvarez was analyzing, waiting. He absorbed the storm with a high guard and bided his time. Then, with one perfectly timed counter, the tide shifted. A left hook and a straight right sent Kirkland crashing to the canvas in the first round. The arena exploded as Canelo showed that he could withstand pressure and respond with devastating force. Though Kirkland rose bravely, his fate was sealed. The Mexican had tasted blood, and the second round, Alvarez came out with renewed ferocity. His combinations were sharp, his body shots brutal, and his counters perfectly timed. Kirkland tried to fight back, showing the heart that had earned him fans, but his punches lacked precision. Canelo, calm under fire, dissected him with accuracy. Another knockdown followed, the result of a perfectly placed uppercut. Still, Kirkland refused to stay down, staggering back to his feet and charging forward once more. But Alvarez was now in complete control. His timing was immaculate, his punches thunderous, and the end seemed inevitable. By the third round, the fight had become a spectacle. Kirkland, desperate and overconfident, lunged forward with reckless abandon. Alvarez, waiting patiently, unleashed one of the most devastating right hands in modern boxing history. With a feint to the body followed by a thunderous overhand right, he sent Kirkland spinning to the canvas, his body collapsing in brutal fashion. The knockout was so violent, so definitive, that even Alvarez himself took a moment to check if his opponent was breathing. The crowd erupted in jubilation, recognizing that they had just witnessed something special. This was not merely a knockout, it was a statement. Canelo Alvarez had silenced his critics, proved his star power, and delivered one of the most iconic finishes in recent boxing history. Through these fights, against Leonardo Tiner, Daniel Jacobs, and James Kirkland, Alvarez built a reputation not only as a great Mexican champion but also as a destroyer of American dreams. Each opponent came with confidence, bravado, or desperation, and each left humbled. Tiner's brashness evaporated under the precision of a 19-year-old prodigy. Jacobs's dreams of New York triumph dissolved in the face of calculated counters. Kirkland's reckless ferocity ended with his body sprawled on the canvas. For Alvarez, these were not just victories, they were demonstrations of mastery. They showed the world that boxing was not merely about throwing punches, but about discipline, intelligence, and artistry. Canelo Alvarez's career is often defined by these moments of humiliation inflicted upon those who doubted him. But beneath the spectacle lies a deeper truth. He represents the spirit of Mexico, the pride of a nation that has produced countless warriors but found in Alvarez a figure who transcended the sport. His rise from a poor boy in Guadalajara to a global superstar is not only about talent but also about determination, sacrifice, and resilience. Every jab, every counter, and every knockout tells the story of a fighter who never stopped learning, who embraced challenges, and who refused to be broken. In the grand narrative of boxing, nations rise and fall, champions come and go, and legends are built in the crucible of the ring. For decades, America stood tall, producing icons who seemed untouchable. But in the era of Canelo Alvarez, the crown shone brighter on Mexico. Through skill, power, and relentless will, Alvarez has humiliated America's finest, not out of hatred but out of an unwavering commitment to prove his greatness. His legacy is not only written in victories, but also in the faces of the men who entered the ring confident and left defeated, broken, and humbled. And as long as Canelo Alvarez continues to fight, Mexico's light will shine brighter, illuminating the truth that in the art of boxing, no one has ever done it quite like him.